Well, if there's one thing you have to give Sega some credit for, it's changing the narrative about Sonic the Hedgehog. Ever since jumping into 3D, critics, writers, and pretty much anyone who could look at a Sonic game objectively had said the same thing. This guy has no business being in 3 dimensions. But over the last few years, Sega has changed that. Game by game, they've been gradually figuring out how to make Sonic work in 3D, and with Sonic Colors, they came closer than ever to restoring Sonic's legacy. In fact, well, Colors was legitimately awesome, and no qualifying statements like, for a 3D Sonic, were necessary. So we're kind of entering a new era for Sonic games. The old trends are gone, and no Sonic game illustrates that better than this one. For years, Sonic games were better on handhelds than consoles, and that's no longer the case. Now it's the other way around. Sonic Generations is a strange game on the 3DS. It's not a handheld version of its home console cousins. In fact, this is kind of a whole different game. There are still 2 Sonics, which still seems like a threat to the Hedgehog's very existence, but otherwise, this is its own Sonic Generations with its own design and its own approach. I guess the most fundamental difference is the levels themselves. Sonic Generations pulls a lot of its levels from classic Sonic the Hedgehog games and then remakes them with a serious attention to detail. The original Green Hill is intact, for example, but remade with subtle tweaks and gorgeous new graphics, as are other Sonic classics. Of course, the other levels are new designs inspired by the classics. This is how the console version works, only on the 3DS, the new levels don't feel all that new. I mean, aren't the modern levels supposed to feel modern? Because they kind of just feel the same as the retro ones, only not as much fun. And that's the core problem with Sonic Generations on the 3DS. The console version achieves this awesome synergy between 2 distinctly different game designs. This version basically gives you the same side-scrolling design for both levels. So the dynamic that makes the game so interesting is totally lost in this version. It's more like an average Sonic Rush than Sonic Generations. Of course, a lot of that might have to do with hardware limitations, but even so, the game just isn't as compelling in this form. And what's more, it was also really hard to see anything on the 3DS's smaller screen. I kept running into enemies I didn't even notice because everything looked like a blur on the handheld, which is a bummer because it's actually a nice looking game. You know, when you can see things. Sonic Generations is a really sweet game on consoles. On the 3DS, it's a bit less impressive. It just has a very downgraded feeling, and although that's definitely an understandable move to a degree, it doesn't make Sonic Generations any less disappointing on the 3DS. And besides, I'm just terrible at this. And how could there be 2 Sonics?